Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this very special session of our Alumni Weekend. My name is Paul Mandel, and I am excited to kick things off here for this session where we celebrate Yale Law School's enduring legacy and honor some exceptional contributions. So I'm delighted to introduce our fearless dean, Heather K. Gerken, the Sol and Lillian Goldman Professor of Law, who will share some insights into some of the ongoing initiatives and noteworthy accomplishments here at Yale Law School. And let me also add my sincere congratulations to our remarkable graduates and faculty whom we'll be honoring as part of our Alumni Award of Merit celebration. So Heather Gerken has held the role of dean here at the Yale Law School for 6 years. And in that relatively short period of time, she has already had a profound impact on our beloved institution. As one of our nation's foremost experts in constitutional and election law, she has reshaped our academic landscape with pioneering work on federalism, on diversity and dissent. So under Dean Gerken's leadership, Yale Law School has admitted the 8 most diverse classes in the history of the law school, including through the class of 2026. Her commitment to academic excellence has fortified our institution's reputation while also promoting diversity and inclusivity. And as all of you know, she has passionately championed need-based financial aid, making Yale Law School the first among all of our peers to offer tuition-free scholarships for the students who need it most, with some very generous donors from among our crowd supporting that initiative. She also withdrew us from the U.S. News and World Report rankings in 2022, which was not easy. And that effort reaffirmed our school's commitment to our core values, pointed out some of the flaws in rankings, and made sure that the law school could remain a place that is open to students from every background. So beyond Yale Law School, Dean Gerken's scholarship has left an indelible mark on the national discourse, influencing policy and shaping conversations on election reform. And her clinic, the San Francisco Affirmative Litigation Project, is a beacon of excellence in legal education. So from her early days as an appellate lawyer to her distinguished tenure as a professor at that other law school up north, to her exceptional leadership here at Yale Law School, Dean Gerken's impact on the legal world is just, it's immeasurable. And for that reason, she's received recognition from many other institutions and organizations out there. And just to name a couple, she's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and now a trustee of the Mellon Foundation. So Dean Gerken will now address us. She will share her insights into the state of the school. And following her remarks, she will introduce this year's amazing Award of Merit honorees, individuals who have made substantial contributions to public service and to the legal profession. So please join me in extending a very warm welcome and appreciation to Dean Gerken.
Good morning. Hope you all are having a wonderful time. It's so fantastic to have you all back here. With apologies for the weather, as you know, only Guido can control the weather. And we generally save it for commencement. So one of my many favorite traditions is to actually have a chance to tell you about what's been going on at the school and to give out the highest award that this law school gives to our donors. So today I wanted to start with a brief update on the day-to-day workings of the place. Many of you know that we have launched some of the biggest programs in our history and one new initiative after the other. So today I'm going to just take a little time to talk about how they all fit together strategically. Because these programs are not isolated endeavors. They are their effort to work together as part of an effort to live up to our best values. So make sure that Yale Law School continues to lead the conversation in education. But first, just the kind of thing that normally deans talk about at the state of the school, the everyday joys of this place. We have been hiring like mad. So we have, over the last few weeks and months, brought in a whole new group of faculty, including Saras Sangha, whose research focuses on corporate law and contract theory. I'm pleased to note we beat Harvard and Stanford on that one. Keithan Ramakrishnan, who is a polymath philosopher focused on torts, contracts, property, and ethics in governance and technology. Natasha Sarin, who actually gave up tenure at Penn Law School to come be a junior professor here. She served as a Deputy Assistant Director for Economic Policy at the Department of the Treasury and focuses on tax collection and remedying wealth inequality. My only quarrel with Natasha is that right now it's a test between me and Joe Biden as to where she's going to be working over the next 5 years because they keep trying to pull her back into the administration. And this Monday, we announced the hire of Keith Whittington, an originalist scholar with expertise in free speech and academic freedom. Keith, I believe, will be the first public law conservative to walk these halls in 40 years. It's an extraordinary moment for the school to pull in and ensure that our public law faculty remain intellectually diverse. And Keith will be heading a center on academic freedom and free speech when he comes to the law school. I also wanted to talk about the amazing 1L class. They are glorious. They hail from 12 different countries, 37 different states, 87 different undergraduate institutions. They have collectively lived and worked in 76 countries and speak 52 different languages. Altogether, they hold 71 advanced degrees that range from chemical and biological engineering to theater studies. This year, and I want to say this number because I find that deans are not saying these numbers anymore, so let me say it. This year, 57% of the class is comprised of students of color. Nearly a third of the members of the new class are first in their family to attend graduate or professional school, and more than 1 in 6 are the first in their family to graduate from college. I'm really proud of this number too. 7% of the class are veterans. Over the last 6 years, we have more than tripled the number of veterans here through a lot of hard work and scholarship support. And I just can't explain to you how wildly eclectic and diverse this group is. Let me just give you some examples. Members of the class of 2026, before they got here, have held a remarkable range of jobs, which include an Osprey pilot, an advisor to the UN, an intelligence analyst, a writer for The Economist, a Netflix pitch executive, a professional speechwriter, and a deck boss from a commercial fishing boat. And as has become the tradition of law schools, only one of those is made up. Now, it would be impossible to talk about all the things that our students and faculty are doing, but let me just give you a little bit of the work that we're having that's having such an impact in the world. So this summer, Connecticut legislators reached an agreement to include an additional $150 million in the state's annual budget to fund low-income school districts. And that increased allocation comes directly from the scholarship and advocacy of one of our very young professors, Zach Liskow. Last month, we are extraordinarily proud to say that for the third time in 2 years, our beloved Harold Koh presented arguments on behalf of Ukraine before the ICJ in The Hague. Harold's efforts to provide a powerful testament to the impact of both scholarship and practice in Yale Law School through his work on behalf of Ukraine. And just 2 weeks ago, the Yale Law School Veterans Legal Services Clinic received court certification for a class action suit on behalf of Air Force veterans, which prompted a settlement with the Department of the Air Force. So the Air Force has now agreed to review the discharge of thousands and thousands of veterans who were not honorably discharged either because of PTSD, traumatic brain injury, mental health disorders, or sexual harassment and assault. Just to give you a sense of what that means that those veterans were not entitled to the benefits that they deserve. And our students have changed their lives forever. Now that victory builds on a years-long effort from the clinic to bring similar actions against other military branches. So they successfully reached agreement with the Army in 2021, with the Navy and the Marine Corps in 2022. And as you all know, the Veterans Clinic did path-breaking work just to make it possible for veterans to bring class actions in the first place. So that's the day-to-day. And I just want to take a beat and mark it, because not many law schools can say that is their day-to-day, but that is what's so magic about the place, this extraordinary conversation that's happening inside the building that spills out and affects the world around us. So now I just want to talk a little bit about some of the programs that we've launched in recent years and how they fit together, because they are all part of a larger strategy to ensure that we lead the conversation on legal education. So as you know, we have launched 2 of the biggest programs in our history, and including the Hearst Horizon Scholarship and the Side Leadership Program, as well as a new Launchpad Scholars Program. And I just want to talk about them one by one to show you how they fit together. But together, the goal is simple. They enable us to pull in talented students from all across the world, to break down the barriers that limit access to the profession, and to equip the next generation of leaders with an ability to affect meaningful change in every community they occupy. And we are already seeing the impact. So let's just think about what we're trying to do. The process starts with finding the most capable and talented students in the country. As many of you know, we have dramatically increased our recruiting efforts. We now draw students from roughly 90 institutions. And today we are doing even more. So I'm proud to say that we launched not the first, but the second pipeline program to bring students to law school. So I think we are the only law school in the country that has 2 pipelines. So building on the work of James Forman's, whose Access to Law program focuses on making law school accessible to students with non-traditional backgrounds from New Haven. Now we have launched in partnership with Latham & Watkins, another effort. It's a nationwide effort to help students without resources, without networks, to prepare to come to law school. Provides students LSAT prep, robust mentorship, and pays for the students to apply to the law schools of their choosing. And I gotta tell you how happy I was when a few months after we launched that program, there's some school to the north, I forget what its name is, Cambridge, somewhere up there, some obscure name, but all of a sudden on their website appears exactly the same program, except practically cut and paste, except instead of Yale Law School, they said Harvard Law School, and there's another law firm there. We did a victory dance when that happens, because our aim is to ensure that all of our peers do something simpler. Now, expanding the pool of talented students is not enough. We have to ensure that the financial barriers that stand in the way are eliminated. And so this year, I'm proud to say we expanded the Hearst Horizon Scholarship Program, which is the first law school full tuition scholarship for students with the greatest financial need. So about 15% of our first year class comes from just below or above the poverty line. Again, I want to baseline some numbers. We know the numbers from one of our peers. Their number is 11. It is not 11%. It is not 11 students in a single class. It is 11 students in their entire student body who fit in that category. And so just to think a little bit more about what this means for these students, these are students, many of whom experienced homeless as kids, who are not, they don't have a safety net. In fact, they're the safety net for their own family members. And this life-changing scholarship lifted the burden of debt from their shoulders to ensure that they can come here. I have been meeting with the 1Ls. I meet with every small group. I give them all an hour to cold call the dean. And what has been just so remarkable is after the 1Ls leave, a couple of them all come back and say, Dean, we're Hearst Horizon scholars. And they tell me what it meant to them. One student wrote me and said, you know, because of this scholarship, I can make sure my parents still have internet, I can still pay for their prescriptions, and I can not worry about us falling under the crushing load of debt. This, he said, if there's a solution to intergenerational poverty, this is it. And so I really want to especially thank Soledad and Bob Hurst, David and Patricia Nurburgring. David is right here, and Jean and Carol Ludwig, who are also here for starting this extraordinary program. I should also note that Paul mentioned that we withdrew from another obscure name, U.S. News and World Report, and I should say why. When we created the Hearst Horizon Scholarship Program, I thought for sure that everyone would move with us, especially because I knew their numbers were so much lower than ours, so it wouldn't take such a big lift to build the program. And I was really surprised that unlike most times when the law school moves, people move with us, it didn't happen. And I realized the reason it didn't happen is because deans across the country feel enormous pressure to keep their LSAT and GPA high, and as a result, they are pouring financial aid into the hands of students who may or may not need it. So in 2016, 70% of law students received financial aid without filling out a form. And that has only become a bigger problem in legal education as we go forward. So the reason I dropped out of U.S. News is that I wanted to lift that pressure off the shoulders of the many deans who would rather put that money into the hands of the students who need it most. And so when I was talking to the Wall Street Journal reporter who was doing a story on it, she says, what are you hoping will happen? I said, well, obviously we care about our own students, but but we want to change legal education's model of fundraising. We want to, and then my chief of staff held up a sign because she was in the office, and she said, "Don't say shame." So I said, we want to inspire other law schools to do with this. So those are two of the big programs we launched. I just want to talk about the third piece of the puzzle, because the final piece of the puzzle is a little bit about tradition and change. It's about thinking about what a law school should look like now and what it should look like 100 years from now. And you all know that this law school produces some of the most eclectic graduates in the universe. So we punch above our weight in the private sector and the public sector. We do extraordinary things. The Bloomberg News once did a story in the Biden administration, said there are a lot of lawyers in the Biden administration who aren't lawyering. And they did a chart. And the chart was 1/3 lawyers, 1/3 non-lawyers, 1/3 Yale Law lawyers. That is also true of the private sector. You can go to Silicon Valley, you can go to Wall Street, and you will see people who are leading in the private sector. So as we thought about that tradition, we also wanted to think a little bit about doubling down on it. How do we support not just our lawyers, which I am one of, but our lawyers writ large? And so we decided we were going to dream into existence a curriculum that will stand up for the next 100 years, that will prepare every one of our students for the challenges they face, because this generation is inheriting impossible problems to solve, and it is time to teach them to solve them. So we recognize that we need to teach the traditional law curriculum, but we also need to ensure they have the literacies they need to change the world. I tell all of the students they need not to just be literate, but numerate. They need to not just know about IP, they need to know about the future of technology. They need to know about legal ethics, and they need to know about ethics writ large. So we have pulled in the biggest program in our history, the resources that we need to build out a curriculum that will train the next generation. So we are offering policy courses and finance courses. Corporate finance, for the first time, I believe, in the history of Yale Law School, is oversubscribed, and one of our bigger classes. And the uptake has been astounding. So we have seen in these courses, they're all oversubscribed. The students are incredibly excited about them. We also want to just note that, like, for our fellow program, there's two centers, which I'll talk about a little bit more. One public sector facing, one private sector facing. When I first spoke to the folks that were building those centers, I said, oh, we'll have 6 or 8 fellows in those centers. Last year, more than 100 of the 200 students in the second year class applied to be fellows in those programs. So this is an opportunity for us to train everyone, our lawyers, and our lawyers writ large, for the future. It's the opportunity to train everyone for their last job and not their first, to build a mini university inside the law school. And of course, that is our tradition. We are, as you know, the one school in the country that teaches the book of Job with enormous seriousness. When I first started this job, they said, you're going to keep Yale weird, right? We're keeping Yale weird, but we're keeping Yale weird in the way that has preserved its best traditions and will ensure that the coming generations of students will be trained to go out and change the world. So this has been, thank you. I'm very pleased to say that we added one more part to that program, which I think is core to teaching leadership. And so just 2 weeks ago, we announced the Ronnie F. Heyman Crossing Divides program, which establishes a speaker series and co-teaching opportunities and opportunities for students to learn how to cross divides. Because we tell all of our students, the key to this law school is that we don't just have conversations across divides, we have friendships across divides. And we want to build out that model for our student. And I'm very grateful, actually, Ronnie Heyman is here somewhere in the building to say thank you to Ronnie for the program. All of this together is to keep this law school what it is, but it is also to ensure something that Mark Allen once said to me, which is a great education should make you humble. You cannot be a lawyer or a leader without a sense of humility and a relentless willingness to question yourself. As I tell the students every year, lawyers are problem solvers. They don't just stand jeering on the sidelines. They get things done by learning to reach agreement, to build consensus in communities that are often defined by difference. And by keeping these abilities at the heart of our pedagogy, at the heart of our curriculum, we are doing our best to ensure that all of our students model the best values of the profession and the best values of this law school. And I just want to say, looking back to all of you, we could not have done any of this without your unwavering support. So many of you helped us think through these programs. So many of you provided financial support for these programs. So many of you have come to serve as mentors to help our students, particularly our first-geners, find the path and figure out what they are built for. So all of this is to say thank you for supporting us along the way, and to just tell you that while I'm pleased to report that despite what is a really challenging state of the world at this moment, the state of this law school remains strong. Thank you very much. I apologize, I'm losing my voice a little bit. For this, I blame my students because I saw so many of my former students last night at one of the last events. I have lost my voice, so apologies for that. So now we come to what I think is the most important and fun moment of the entire weekend, and that is the opportunity to celebrate the change makers and people who helped make this place what it is and who have helped change the world. So this is the moment when we bestow the Award of Merit, which is the highest honor bestowed by the Yale Law School Association for people who have had a long-standing commitment to this institution and to their communities. And it is an extraordinary pleasure to announce them. We have actually a number of winners this year because our executive committee couldn't quite decide among them, and so we thought it would be better to actually honor all of them. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about each person and then hand over the award and give them an opportunity to say a few words. So let me start with our first recipient. Our first recipient is Eugene Ludwig, an internationally recognized banker, internationally recognized leader in banking, financial technology, regulation, risk management, and fiscal policy. Gene's accomplishments have left an indelible mark on our nation's legal and financial landscape. Where I try to give you a full accounting of Gene's extraordinary work in his career, we would be here until Sunday morning, but let me just give you a sampling. As Comptroller of the Currency under President Clinton, Gene entirely revamped the Community Reinvestment Act, injecting billions, that's billions with a B, billions of dollars into low and moderate income communities. After his tenure at Comptroller, Gene channeled the same fearlessness and curiosity and willingness to challenge the status quo into founding Promontory Financial Group and the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity. The Ludwig Institute, you should know, spends an enormous amount of time thinking about regulatory labor market questions, economic inequality, and if you could describe it in one sentence, I would say it is focused on working people and making sure this economy does right by them. If you look across Gene's career, at every single step, you will see that he was focused on those in need and the changes the country must make to live up to its values. I also know there are moments when Gene disappears on us, and that's because he's doing the quiet work of changing the world. So I suspect that half the time he's writing legislation inside of Congress or talking to economic advisors in the Biden administration. But it is extraordinary that his resume doesn't even capture a fraction of what he does. And Gene's contributions to this law school are entirely consummate. He has helped make Yale Law School not only a catapult, but a bridge. I told you all about the remarkable scholarship program we launched. Gene and Carol are two of the founding parents of that program. Gene isn't just changing the life of individual students and their families by helping lift the burden of debt off their shoulders by supporting the Hearst Horizons program. He has also been central in launching our efforts to train the next generation of leaders, putting in place the programming that helps every one of our students, especially those who come here without networks, to go out and change the world. So he created the physical home for the leadership program, which is right in the heart of our courtyard, dubbed Ludwig Hall, in honor of Gene and Carol. He and Carol created the Gene and Carol Ludwig program in public sector leadership, which will prepare generations of students for careers in public service, not just by lighting up the path for our many lawyers and lawyers writ large to find their way, but to ensure that they are broad-gauge thinkers with deep ethical values. Now, Gene's commitment to this community stems from his strongly held belief that this institution has been, and I quote, the cornerstone that has allowed him to achieve so much as a lawyer, a public servant, and a leader in business. With this understanding, it is clear that Gene's involvement with the law school, especially with the Ludwig program, is driven by his extraordinary desire to provide a similarly transformative experience to the bright minds who are at the school today. His steadfast support and commitment have enabled the center to thrive and continue its mission. There are students walking these halls today whose lives have been entirely changed thanks to Gene and Carol's dedication to giving back, to breaking down barriers for the next generation of leaders. His unwavering support of Yale has enabled us to be a leader in the field, and the impact will be felt for generations. And what is true of our students is actually true of generations of Americans who have benefited from the countless efforts that Gene has made to promote equity and make sure that this country's opportunities and gifts are within everyone's reach. Gene has said that to improve and grow, it is also important to work hard on your natural weakness. Never be so daunted that you just give up and do not continue the race. Gene's contributions to the law school have empowered our students to follow his path, to refine their leadership, to find opportunities to do better and to do good. With each new step and each new curiosity Gene has pursued, he has exemplified the impact that a dedicated person can have on the realms of law and finance, in the private and public sector, and we are so honored to have him with us. So please join me in inviting Gene to the stage to accept this award.
You're up.
This was over the top. I must say, if I'd started life with anything like that kind of introduction, I could have flown. I don't know what it would. Thank you very much, Dean Gerken. I'm really honored. Actually, I've got to say I'm humbled to be here, and I'm humbled to get this award. I spent this morning and last night with my class, and I was impressed again by Yale, how extraordinary my classmates are in terms of their intellect and their decency. And that's true throughout this law school. The Yale faculty is extraordinary. Dean Koh's over here, and I know Harold for a very long time and have been in awe of Harold. And so this is an extraordinary place. But I've got to say, Dean Gerken, you have taken this to a new level of excellence and are taking the school really to the top. And both in terms of her talent, intellect, she reminds me in every way of what is tops about this institution. But the one thing that I hadn't been prepared for, which is really daunting, is her public speaking ability. And I am reminded of the worst moment in my life. The worst moment of my life came when I was Comptroller of the Currency. And I got a call from the president's office, and I was asked to go down to the mall, the Washington Mall, to give a speech because he couldn't make it. I said, okay, well, I'll go down. I get down to the mall, and who is there but Jesse Jackson? Jesse Jackson for 10,000 cheering people. And I'm next. A regulator. Whoa! So this was kind of the same thing. I promised myself I would never be in that position again, but you know, she's the Jesse Jackson of Dean. Let me take a second to acknowledge my beautiful and wonderful wife, Carol, who has been a partner to me throughout my professional career, and without her help, I wouldn't be here today. Now, I wanted to just bore you with a couple of things, if I may. The law school itself, YLS, and this new leadership program, it seems to me, are critical in our troubled world because of standards. The standards, more than all the technical ability, more than all the brilliance, it's the standards and that it sets. Number one, I think of three of them, and the three key ones. An unswerving dedication to truth. That's true of the rule of law and law generally, but this school in particular is a place that seeks truth. Number two, finding that truth through serious scholarship and honest debate that shows respect for the views of others. The thing that's really wonderful here, beyond seeking truth, is it's how it treats each other. I had people in my class who I had very different views of. They treated me with respect. I treated them with respect. It's the nature of the Yale Law School and the nature of this new leadership program. And then finally, a dedication to the service of our fellow man and woman, rich, poor, people coming from the humblest circumstances. And this makes Yale just extraordinary. And that's what the leadership program is all about. Now, you then say to me, well, okay, why on earth would you have a leadership program if the basic standards of these two operations, the law school itself and the leadership program, are the same? And I think the answer to that is the following. There are, in fact, as you all know, disciplines that for many of us, and particularly today, are really enormously important in addition to the legal disciplines in terms of a variety of different activities which we engage in, including whether or not it's today, whether it's narrowly a legal pursuit. They are basic management and implementation skills, basic business, number one, and number two, basic business skills, including, importantly, financial and accounting skills. And then, of course, today, obviously more than ever, technological skills and data. I mean, the world is changing, whether we like it or not. Holding back artificial intelligence is like King Canute holding back the waves. This is going to be part of our life and our children's life going forward, and we've got to know a lot more about it. Now, I want to dwell on the first of these more than the other two, that is implementation and management, because this is, I think, something that is completely lost in the weeds. And when I was talking to my class this morning, they got it instantaneously. We live the life of the mind at this law school very much, and many of us just love the life of the mind. Important, big ideas, change the world. But very often, our biggest ideas fail because the implementation of those ideas doesn't hit the mark. And as we fail, sometimes we really do damage to low and moderate income people. I was reminded a few weeks ago, I was talking to one of the, in essence, cabinet level people in Washington, and I said, look, there's a rule here I don't understand. I said, I'm supposed to be an expert in this area, but I just can't make head or tail of this rule. He closes the door and he looks furtively around and he says, you know, Gene, I got to be honest, it got through the staff, but I don't understand it either. Now, can you imagine? He doesn't understand it either? That we have rule upon rule upon rule. We need regulations and rules. I was a regulator. But to hit their mark is absolutely critical because there are people that depend on them. And it isn't just, you know, a half science or something to be demeaned in terms of implementation. It's got to be elevated in terms of something we really take seriously. Otherwise, we have a sinking world. In that regard, there are rules that set the headline statistics in economics we all live by: unemployment, inflation, GDP, the growth. And what happened is those regulations are all wrong today. They were set in the 1930s. They don't make sense today. And what's happened is these headline statistics are absolutely, as a meaningful matter, wrong. And what wrong means is that middle and low income Americans have been sinking for 40 years. Their life is getting worse. And that is the reason we are having a less and less civil society, in my view. So why do we want to do all of this and have a leadership program and be the special Yale Law School we can be? Because it is not only a matter of justice that low and moderate income people all over the world and in America ought to have a fair shake, but also, frankly, in everybody's self-interest, I'm sorry to say, because we will not have a civil society here in the coming years if we don't deal with the difficulties of our less well-off brethren. And so all of the things that the leadership program is doing is critical. YLS is critical to the future of this country. And I'm honored to receive this award, deeply honored. Thank you, Dean, faculty, and my fellow students who deserve it more than I do. And I just am humbled, and I thank you all very much.
That was wonderful. Take it with you. So the next two awards are designed to honor people who have been instrumental over the course of the last 50 years in shaping our clinical program at Yale and making it, quite simply, the best clinical program in the country. So first I want to talk about a person who carried forward the torch of the clinical program for decades, helped our clinics become what they are today, profoundly shaped the lives of so many, taught every one of our current clinicians to teach, and was also the first woman of color ever tenured at the law school. And that hits especially home for me. We have been working hard to diversify our faculty. We have tripled the number of Black and Latinx and Asian American faculty. But as the first woman dean, I am very conscious of the people who smooth the way for all of us. And so we are today going to honor, it's hard to get out of law professor mode, Professor Koh Peters, the Saul Goldman Clinical Professor Emeritus of Law and the first woman of color ever tenured at this law school. Her career has been dedicated to teaching and reminding us about the human dimensions of law. Jean has dedicated her life to her family and to asylum law. She has served as a fierce advocate for children and families in need. She's an award-winning lawyer and a prolific author, not to mention a gifted guitarist and singer. She's also the most zen person on the planet, which is helpful in a place like this. Now, having grown up in New Haven from the time she was 3 years old, her roots in the Yale Law School community run deep. Consider this: her parents, Doctors Kwan Lim Koh and Hae Sung Chun Koh, first taught at Yale Law School in the 1960s. If you come by my office, there's a photo of both of them sitting with the faculty alongside Polly Murray. Her husband, Jim Peters, attended Yale Law School. His mother and her mother-in-law, Ellen Ash Peters, was the first woman ever to hold an academic chair at Yale Law School and, of course, was later Chief Justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court. And Jean's brother, Harold, our former dean, is an integral part of this place. It would be hard for Jean to be more embedded in the history and traditions of this school, but she has shaped them in every possible way. For more than 30 years, she was a part of the Yale Law School faculty, driving invaluable progress in how we approach clinical education. During that time, she helped develop, teach, and disseminate the gold standard in cross-cultural lawyering. Starting in 1999, she co-created the Habits of Cross-Cultural Lawyering, a curriculum that has taken root in clinical practices across the country. While the program is targeted at law students and lawyers, it is packed with the habits and lessons that are relevant to all of us. Habit number 3 of Jean's curriculum, parallel universe thinking, asks us to sometimes just press pause on our assumptions. She encourages us to slow down, to proceed with caution, to act in grace, and to minimize judgmentalness. And this process, which privileges thoughtfulness and respect over haste and disdain, is important to all of us, especially at a moment like this, and it is essential for aspiring and practicing lawyers. It also perfectly embodies Jean's humanity and the way she is as a person. So for 3 decades, Jean has taught people to represent children, most recently as in the Saul and Lillian Goldman Family Advocacy Clinic for Children and Youth. Jean has taught students how to represent asylum seekers, especially through the Immigration Legal Services Clinic. And most importantly, she has taught all of us how to be better students and teachers, advocates and lawyers, and especially human beings. Now, Jean can't be with us today, so she's going to join us by video, and then I am delighted to say I will call up her brother to receive the award on her behalf. And I should just note, this is, I think, the first time a brother and sister have both received this award. So on the screen, we should have Jean.
Many thanks, Heather, and to the law school, the home of my legal vocation. To Steve, Denny, Frank, and Dan, who first built the hearth of that home, and to Eugene Ludwig, who has stoked its flames these many years. With thanks, too, to the Yale Law School Association, I am delighted to offer 2 ideas dear to me to alumni, including my students and you serving under-resourced clients. These concepts are flow and self-compassion. First, consider Csikszentmihalyi's description of flow. In flow, you are completely involved in an activity for its own sake. The ego falls away. time flies. Your whole being is involved and you're using your skills to the utmost. Totally absorbed in this timeless, selfless, seemingly effortless, intrinsically rewarding moment, you feel your best and perform your best. A balance of challenge and skill catalyzes flow. Challenge enough to occupy the mind without anxiety, and skill enough to meet the challenge. I recognize now that flow and collaboration with students serving children and refugees filled my teaching in the clinic with hope and joy. My 30 years at Yale are a blur of days deeply engrossed in strategizing with students for clients who struggled to be at home in the world, exiled from all they knew. I remember countless times when growing skill and grueling challenge made one of us rise up, then another, and soon all of us together, to offer the best of each idiosyncratic one of us, minute by minute, day by day. When joy flowed into strong work, we reasoned backwards to find out what brought it all forth, and then work those strategies into your daily routines. You found flow after basketball, cooking, meditation, drawing, macrame, Zumba, karaoke, board games. You supported my flow strategies, John Williams soundtracks while reading briefs, my office jigsaw puzzle, things of beauty to start class. I thank my students of color in particular for what you taught me about flow. You faced the relentless otherness of entering a profession still dominated by male white norms. You faced the greatest enemies of flow, disruption and distraction, too often in large and small sideswipes of stereotype or discrimination. I watched your flow strategies turn you back to the joy and meaning of the work, caring for the client, using your deep gladness to re-find flow. And flow is contagious. So many times when I struggled with distraction and anxiety of my own, you arrived for supervision flush with a new breakthrough and swept me back into that timeless, ever hopeful space. What are we flowing from? What are we flowing to? I'd love to think that we flow strongest from our deepest sources of wisdom and joy, towards vocation, towards the world's deepest hunger. I hope you will help me confirm this. Second, Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer have spearheaded fascinating research and teaching about self-compassion. Self-compassion insists that the loving, connected presence that I saw you direct towards your clients be equally directed inwards towards yourself. Recognize that you too suffer, your privilege and advantages notwithstanding, in a way that is universally human and deserves your kind attention. Neff stresses that this gentle self-compassion, loving, connected presence may also need to be accompanied by, at key moments, by fierce, empowered truth, shoring up boundaries under attack, speaking truth to power, and owning power yourself. Research links self-compassion to living authentically, befriending the inner critic, fueling motivation, easing procrastination, and caregiving robustly, among other findings. Yet, one paradox of self-compassion is that you must undertake it for its own sake, first and foremost. In any moment, you can be kind to yourself, understand deeply that you share woes with many around the world and across history, and be present to your hurt. Do this not to improve the quality of your life, though this may well happen, but simply because you suffer. As your hearts go out to clients and friends, even strangers who hurt, that instinct must feed your own self-kindness in the face of your own pain. I wish we had all learned more about flow and self-compassion in my clinic days. I remember being confused when your warm understanding of me and your clients contrasted with harsh self-reproach. I remember wondering how I could help you structure your clinic work so it would not bleed you dry. And I remember worrying that I had not fully equipped you to continue this hard work into your careers. Please consider whether flow and self-compassion might be missing pieces in your living your vocation. These reflections come with my warmest wishes to you all.
Do one with it on the table. Take one more.
It seems somehow appropriate that Harold has two of these, actually, given his extraordinary deanship and who he is. So the next and our final award of merit goes not to a single person, but to a collective, the wondrous people who founded Yale's clinical program. Our clinical program is unmatched by any program in the country. It allows our students to do work of extraordinary ambition, representing real people with real problems in real time. It helps us not just bridge, but dissolve the practice-theory divide, and embed service into the warp and woof of the law school, making clear what our values are. Our clinics have had an astonishing impact on the world around us, all the while training a generation to serve. Today, we have an opportunity to honor those who made this wondrous program possible. I want to say a word about each of them before calling two of them here to accept the honor on their behalf. And I should just note for his many students, also in our hearts today is our beloved Jay Pottinger, who we lost this year. So one of the people who will be coming to the stage is Steve Wizner. Few people have recognized the potential of law schools as much as Steve. He began his legal journey at a law school without a clinical program. As a student at the University of Chicago, he spent countless hours volunteering in a small legal aid office housed in the basement of the law school. Despite the lack of course credit or compensation, he dedicated much of his free time to engaging with real cases and real clients. He's recounted the experience as being instrumental in his career, as his first real exposure to legal work. But there was something missing. Because legal aid was unaffiliated with the university, Steve wasn't actually able to practice as a student. Now, after school, Steve earned a spot in the Department of Justice Honors Program as a trial attorney in the criminal division, and he later moved to New York City to serve as a neighborhood legal services lawyer. He was perfectly content and thought he had found his passion, but he got a call from a friend in New Haven who said, "Come on up and discuss the possibility of setting up a clinical program here." After some hesitation, he agreed to come up for a day and to offer his advice in the program, but made clear his staunch opposition to leaving his job in New York. I think you see where this is going. In a true testament to the persuasive powers of Yale Law students, he was interviewing for the job by lunchtime. When Steve first joined the law school in 1970, he was surrounded by an extraordinarily talented group of students eager to dive into clinical work. He began working to institutionalize a first-of-its-kind clinical education program, and the results have been astonishing. Across decades, he has helped cultivate a clinical program that towers above others. Each year, students from all over the world flock to Yale for its unrivaled clinics. And interwoven into Steve's story has been a career-long effort to combat poverty. In private practice, he litigated the landmark United States Supreme Court case, Goldberg versus Kelly, which safeguarded due process rights for welfare recipients. As a professor, he has spent decades convincing young law students to dedicate their careers to eradicating economic and social injustice. At each stage of his life, he has been an exemplar for the most inspirational among us, and he's empowered generations of students to go out into the world as confident, capable lawyers. So although he's going to come up in a little bit, I think we should give him a huge round of applause. Our next honoree is Daniel Fried. Nearly 14 years ago, Yale Law School lost one of its giants. Daniel Fried was a preeminent attorney, scholar, and activist, and like Steve, was chief architect of the clinical program here. In fact, you can't tell Steve's stories without Dan. After serving in the Navy, Dan graduated from Yale Law School in 1951. He first worked as an investigator in the Senate and then in private practice in DC. After a few years, he joined DOJ, where he served for a decade, eventually becoming director of the Office of Criminal Justice, an office he helped inaugurate in 1964. Dan eventually worked his way back to New Haven in 1969 to help oversee the build-out of the clinical program. A few months later, he made a fateful call to his former DOJ friend Steve, and the rest, as you know, is history. Now, Dan was, of course, not just a pioneer in education. He led a movement to rethink, reframe, and reshape criminal justice in the United States. His scholarship on bail, detention, and sentencing helped usher in systemic criminal justice reform, so much so that his book, Bail in the United States, is often credited for being the inspiration for the 1966 Bail Reform Act. While Dan would have been the first to admit that criminal justice has a long way to go, for the progress that has been made, he deserves an immense amount of praise. And while he cannot be with us today, many members of his family here, and I want to just thank all of them for being here and joining us. Another giant loss to us is Frank Dineen. A mentor for generations of lawyers who went for public service, Frank Dineen was a force of change all across Connecticut, and he leaves behind an enormous legacy. Senior counsel at the New Haven Legal Assistants Association, a clinical lecturer at Yale Law School, and an alum, Frank was one of the longest-serving legal services lawyer in the entire country. Known by his colleagues as someone who would never compromise his integrity, Frank was a force for change, for amending Connecticut's landlord-tenant law to improve tenant protections. Providing access to the legal system for people who formerly had no means of obtaining representation and who desperately needed it, was one of Frank's callings. Upon receiving the Distinguished Service Award from Yale University and Yale Law School, Frank noted, and I quote, "Without legal representation, the law remains sealed in the books and rights lose their meaning." Thanks largely to the involvement of Yale Law students, New Haven established a Municipal Legal Aid Bureau in 1927, one of the very first in the country, with Frank as its student chair. As one of Frank's former students remarked, Frank always reminded us, just by being himself, that there will always be a lot of work to do, and we must never let ourselves forget how our grand and lofty principles will translate into the lives of everyday people. Frank, more than anything, called upon us to expand our vision of how lawyers serve as a voice for the voiceless and as advocates for the underrepresented. And again, members of his family are here, so I ask you to give them a large round of applause. And finally, I want to talk about our beloved Denny Curtis, another giant in the field of clinical education and a true visionary leader who has transformed the ways that law school teach students about law and the profession. Denny's work has not only challenged the status quo, but has paved the way for a more hands-on approach to legal education. His influential books, such as Toward a Just and Effective Sentencing System and Representing Justice, have shaped our understanding of sentencing reform and the relationship between adjudication and democracy. But Denny's impact extends far beyond the pages of his publication. He has given countless law students the opportunity to gain real-world experience while serving marginalized communities. Denny has supported students to represent federal inmates at the Danbury Federal Collection Institution and patients at Connecticut Valley Hospital. He developed clinical offerings with the Connecticut agency charged with administering the lawyer discipline process. And he has facilitated countless other opportunities for students to work in legal service programs on behalf of undocumented people, the elderly, the homeless, the developmentally disabled, and clients of legal aid societies. Denny has a gift for inspiring students and helping them reach their full potential, and he is a scholar. His work on clinical education and criminal justice has profoundly infected the legal profession and created space for students to work within legal institutions to assist directly with reform efforts. These four remarkable men helped shape Yale Law School in the most profound way possible. They have generated waves of change that have washed across communities across the country and the world. They have taught generations of students why service matters. We are forever in their debt, both for making this place the place it is and for making the communities in which we all live the place they are. And so with that, I will invite Denny and Steve to come forward to accept their awards.
Oh, thank you. Pop it open. Great.
Right there, you just stand right behind them. Stand there, Denny. Denny, if you stand right here, we're gonna take a picture. We're gonna take one picture.
And he's older, so he gets to go first.
Hello. Can you imagine how it must have been to practice with these guys? It is amazing. Thank you, Heather. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this award, and I also appreciate sharing it with my colleagues and friends, Steve, Frank Dineen, Koh Peters, and Dan Freed. And it's lovely to be in the same group as Eugene Ludwig as well. Getting this award from the Yale Law School brings me full circle. Students were at the center of the founding of this school's clinical program. These students from 50 years ago and before, some of whom I see in the audience, succeeded in demanding that the law school to support work with clients in substantive areas of law. And this award is also a tribute to all of the many students and faculty who have helped the program to expand. A word about origins is in order. In the 1960s, this is after the New Haven Legal Assistance Association opened, law students worked there with Frank Dineen. After Dan Freed left the Justice Department and came back to Yale, he became a staunch advocate for the law school establishing a clinic. In the summer of 1969, then Dean Lou Pollack and Dan Freed came to DC, where I was practicing law, and asked me to come to New Haven to begin a neighborhood law office. The neighborhood law office was supposed to be on Wall Street, right down the block here. But the offices that they had designed for us didn't meet any of the requirements that we needed, and also had many code violations. And so anyway, we got offices in the law school, and that was great because Steve and I knew that once we were in the law school, they could never kick us out. So meanwhile, Yale got money, seed money, from the Ford Foundation to support what Frank was doing at Legal Aid. And under Dan Freed's guidance, that grant helped us launch the clinical program. Dan, along with the rest of us founding fathers, understood the need to ground clinical legal education in substantive areas of law so that students and faculty learn from clients' experiences about the administration of justice, or the lack thereof. Dan was always focused on underserved populations. Through his Department of Justice connections to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Dan pioneered our entry into the Federal Correctional Institution at Danbury, where some of you I remember actually worked there. Students had met with the clients. Dan had got us into the institution, and students had met with clients, talked with them, but didn't, and they were eager to do direct representation, but up until then they couldn't. So we decided, okay, let's get started. We concentrated on parole hearings and challenges to conditions of confinement. I remember one of our first victories was to get a sentence computation by the institution changed so that one of the prisoners would get out 2 days earlier. So, and that was a small victory, but we celebrated it. And of course, we found that our phone was ringing night and day from people who wanted us to represent them. And incidentally, the phone would ring and you'd pick it up and it would say, "Can I speak to Jerome Frank, please?" And we'd say, "Well, he's not here right now." But at the same time as I was doing Danbury, Steve was at Connecticut Valley Hospital with a program to represent patients at the Connecticut Valley Mental Hospital in all sorts of different ways, even doing commitment proceedings. At one point, Steve and I did the commitment proceedings for about a third of the patients in Connecticut, because that hospital did a third of the commitment proceedings in Connecticut. And of course, Frank was still working at Legal Aid, and just Steve and Frank were so great to work with. I mean, it's wonderful to work and have wonderful lawyers to be around and tell you what to do, which never was a problem for either Steve or Frank. It was a long struggle for the law school to be willing to give academic credit or credit at all for clinical work. In the beginning, there were things called forensic credit. You get forensic 1 credit per semester with a limit of 5 during your law school career. But we needed a lot more than that. And so we fought to get credit for the students for the work that they were doing, and we won. We won the battle in the early 70s. So by the time I actually left in 1980, where I went to University of Southern California to start a program there, LSO and Yale's clinics were embedded, ensconced, and have happily grown enormously since. Heather made a reference to Jay Pottinger. I'm happy I was able to help recruit him to come when I was leaving. And he, after some years, became the director of the program. And he expanded it into community development and legislation. And of course, Koh Peters anchored representation of children. And you can imagine the respect and affection that students from this, what would it be like to be a student of Koh Peters? You know, you can hardly imagine it. And so, while I'm trying to dispense credit, apart from Dean Gerken, I have to say Guido Calabrese was a warm and enthusiastic and energetic supporter. And after him, and thereafter, Tony Kronman, Harold Coe, Bob Post, and now Heather are serious champions of this kind of education. When Judith Resnick and I returned to Yale in 1997, along with our son Jonathan, who's here today, I began another kind of clinic dealing with lawyer misbehavior before Connecticut's statewide disciplinary committee. In some cases, students helped prosecute lawyers who had allegedly violated ethical rules. And in others, we defended lawyers against these allegations. Dan Fried had by then launched an innovative sentencing class, and I joined this program along with others, including Kate Stith, Judges Nancy Gertner, and Sid Stein, who's here today, and Professor, now nominated to be a judge, Sarah Russell. So I'm going to turn this podium over to Steve Wizner. For the last 50 years, I've had the privilege and pleasure of calling Steve my partner. And we have been a part of a remarkable group of teaching lawyers, working with you guys, students, and propelling us forward and providing to communities in need, thinking through the institutional questions, revising statutes, case law, and regulations. And in the course of this, I think we all moved the needle a little bit in changing legal education. So many thanks to all of you. I usually do better than this.
Oops.
Okay, Denny did it all, said everything. I want to say something about Dan Fried and about Frank Dineen. Frank Dineen's wife, Rini, is in the front row, and 2 rows of his family are here. It was a day in spring of 1970, and I was in my storefront legal services office in New York's Lower East Side when I received a phone call from Dan Fried. Dan and I had both been lawyers in the Department of Justice in Washington in the 1960s, and we moved on to our next jobs. Dan left for a professorial appointment at the Yale Law School, and I left for a legal services job on the Lower East Side of New York. I got a phone call one day from Dan, and he asked if I would be interested in applying for a job in the clinical program. I said, "What's a clinical program?" He said, "That's part of your job." And it was. I took a train to New Haven from New York, and to my surprise, I was surrounded by a dozen students or more who were excited about a new clinical program. Students had been arguing and advocating for a clinical type of education for years. And finally, when Bill Pincus, who was part of the CPI program in the Ford Foundation, dangled some money before 5 law schools, Yale was one of them, and so Yale got a grant from the Ford Foundation, and we then Denny and I started saying, well, now what do we do? We had both theory and practice questions. We decided that we would have to focus on students, so that instead of having students help us on cases, we had to help them on their cases. They were the primary representative for clients, and we would be overseeing them. That was a method that we did continue throughout our time together. When students would say, "What should I do next?" we would use the Socratic method. "What do you think?" And when they didn't realize that there was a statute, because in those days we taught Supreme Court cases, we didn't teach statutes, we said, "Do you think there might be a statute? Did you look?" And they say, "Oh, statute." And then they would get a statute book. I had been met Frank as soon as I accepted the job. Frank was a very well-known legal services attorney, and it turns out he had been working voluntarily with students for many years. He graduated in '61. He was in the Legal Aid Bureau. He started inviting students to come and represent poor people, and he would have classes in the evening classes. He had no a formal relationship with the Yale Law School at that time. He volunteered, and the students received no credit or monetary compensation, but they volunteered. And so when the volunteer relationship between Frank and his students laid one of the foundations for our clinic. We kept going with Frank for more than 50 years. The law school eventually paid for half of his salary at New Haven Legal Assistance, and he had an office at the law school. And for 50 years, he was back and forth between New Haven Legal Assistance downtown and walked to the law school for his office. He was using the law school and that relationship between the law school and New Haven Legal Assistance as a teaching hospital. The next thing that Denny and I were discussing was how do we teach? Other law schools who had been also getting Ford Foundation money called it skills training. And we said, we don't think we should call it skills training. We should call it representing clients and learning what you need to know in order to do it properly. So it's more than skills. It's how you choose who the client should be and how you supervise them. Frank and I eventually reduced the LAA clinic part of it to a landlord-tenant clinic where we represented clients in eviction proceedings. Frank knew a lot about it because he had been one of the authors of the eviction statute in Connecticut. And what we did in that case was to use the statute and teach the students how to use the statute to interpret in ways that we could help clients. Denny and I went on to develop other clinics, as Denny said. He said everything, so I will leave that alone. But the main thing was that we really think that we established an educational program in which students learned law through practice. So if they needed to get some theory, they would get it. But as the saying goes, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. So there was lots of discussion about the relationship of theory and practice. I guess I want to join Denny in thanking the deans that supported our clinical program over the years, and the current dean, Heather Gerken, who actually sat in on some of our clinical faculty lunches and started a clinic of her own, which was quite amazing. Denny and I appreciate the awards we're receiving, but we really want students here who have been in the clinic to know that it was the students who really made our clinic so successful. By actually taking on responsibility for things that most people would be nervous about, but we were there behind them to catch them if they fell backwards. Denny and I would talk to clinical teachers from other law schools and tell them some of the kinds of cases that our students were handling. And they said, oh, well, Yale students can do that, our students can't. I think we tried to tell them, no, if you give them students responsibility and help them exercise it, they'll do it. Anyway, you've heard about from Denny and from Heather about some of the stuff that we've been doing, so I'll let it go at that. I want to, again, thank Dan Freed for calling me on the phone and offering me a job, and Frank Dineen for teaching me so much about legal services practice, even though I was already a legal services lawyer. So to the family of Dan and to the wife of Rini, thank you. Thank you, everybody.